did Alaska politics get so weird so fast? I mean, the state's only 49 years old. People drive cars older than that. And those cars need far less repair work. Start with Alaska Senator Ted Stevens, who is, despite being convicted on 7 federal corruption felonies, is leading his re-election bid against Democratic challenger Anchorage Mayor Mark Begich. Now, he's only leading by just over 3,000 votes. With more than 90,000 ballots left to be counted in the coming days, anything could happen. Stevens could still lose. Imagine that. A convicted felon losing an election for United States Senate. If Senator Stevens does get reelected, though, Democratic leader Harry Reid has made clear that no matter what the people of Alaska want, a convicted felon will not be welcome in the U.S. Senate. Small mercies. So who would go to the Senate from Alaska if it isn't Begich and it can't be Stevens? We're going there. Where else can we go? Say hello to the senator from I Can See Russia from Here. At least maybe. This being Alaska, there is some confusion about whether a vacated Stevens seat would be filled by a special election or by an appointment from the governor, and how long that appointment would last. If there was a special election and Governor Palin decided to run, that could be her ticket back to Washington. And that sort of a political strategy might explain why we're seeing so much of Governor Palin on the TV machine these days. She has done a blizzard of recent interviews, including telling the Anchorage Daily News and KTUU TV recently that running for vice president was good for Alaska because, quote, I believe that with tens of millions of people seeing kind of a different face of Alaska, and again, not me personally, but what it is that we represent, hardworking, unpretentious, conservationists, all these things that our administration and my family, all that we embody, has been good for Alaska, and the eyes of the nation are on Alaska. They're going to be on us for a long time. I find it difficult to read Sarah Palin quotes with appropriate cadence, so please forgive me. Of course, her hard times in national polls kind of started when the eyes of the nation first really focused on Alaska. So what's her view of the Senate race again, and Ted Stevens, and the question of whether or not he ought to resign?
The Alaskan voters have spoken, and me not being a dictator won't be telling anybody what to do. A governor, especially one that's not going to be a dictator in all this, doesn't have control over that.
So we have a Senate race too close to call at this hour, and an incumbent who is leading, who would likely be forced out of Washington if he were reelected. And we've got an emphatically non-dictatorial governor who seemed to take a shine to the lower 48, and lately to as many TV cameras as present themselves. Where is all this leading exactly? Well, joining us now is Alaska State Senator Bill Wielechowski, live from the last frontier. Senator Wielechowski, many thanks for joining us again. I appreciate your being here.
Hi, Rachel. Good to be back.
Where does the Alaska Senate race stand right now in terms of the votes counted and whether it's still seen as a toss-up?
Well, Senator Stevens is currently ahead by about 3,300 votes. However, there's about 91,000 votes that are still outstanding, and that's about 29% of the total number of ballots that we expect to be cast in this election. So there's still a huge, huge number of ballots that are out. And Mayor Begich, Mayor of Anchorage, who was running against Senator Stevens, had done very well in absentee voting and very well in early voting. So there are some people out there who say that the race isn't over yet, including, interestingly enough, Senator Stevens' pollster, who predicted just a day or two ago that Mayor Begich would come back and win this race. So it's going to be interesting next few days.
Just to be clear, Senator Stevens' pollster is saying that Begich is going to win?
He is, actually. He just came out on a TV show a night or two ago, and he's run some numbers. And also, he called the race on election eve after the polls closed. He actually predicted, according to his polls, that Mayor Begich would win the race by about 8%. And that was in line with what every other pollster in the state had been predicting, about a 4 to 8 point spread for Mayor Begich. So it was surprising when the numbers came in the way they did, and people are saying, well, because Mayor Begich did so well in the early voting and the absentee voting, that they expect him to really pick up a lot of votes once all the votes are counted. later this week.
There are a number of strange things going on when you compare the polls, not only for the Stevens and Begich race, but also for the Don Young's House race, also for the presidential race. There's big differences between at least the results thus far and what we've seen from the polls. There's also actually just really strange numbers in terms of turnout. Alaska was lower by double digits in terms of turnout this year as compared with 2004, which seems weird with the state's governor on the presidential ballot and two really hotly contested congressional races. What do you make of those anomalies? Do you think when all the ballots are finally counted that some of those things will actually be closer to their predictions?
It's hard to say. The results are very unusual. The number of people that turned out really has surprised a lot of people, and the results, quite frankly, have surprised a lot of people. Rasmussen polls conducted polling in every Senate race in the country, and they were accurate in every single one except this one in Alaska. The pollsters here in Alaska all had called Mayor Begich winning. They all had called Ethan Berkowitz winning the House race. A lot of the pollsters had predicted that the presidential race was even narrowing to about 4 points or 5 points. So it was really surprising on election eve to see the huge spreads that we had. But even more surprising was the low turnout. Right now, we'll have actually a lower turnout than we would have had in 2004, the presidential election. And if the numbers stay the way they are, which we don't expect there are that many ballots out there, this will actually be about the second lowest voter turnout in the history of Alaska in a presidential year. And it just really has a lot of people wondering how that's possible when we had a governor running as vice president, and we had Barack Obama, who really had a huge inspirational effect on a lot of the Democrats in the state and really increased the number of people who attended the caucuses here in Alaska by huge percentages. And there were also massive get-out-the-vote efforts on both sides. So it just really has a lot of people scratching their heads trying to figure out why exactly the vote totals were so low.
And I can tell you, as you are explaining that right now, there are people who are election protection activists and people who worry about the integrity of the vote coast to coast and beyond, who are adjusting their tinfoil hats right now, myself included, wondering what's going on. It just seems like too many different factors to have gone so weird. And I guess to the extent that everybody's keeping a close eye on things, we ought not worry about this being stolen in some weird way. But it just does seem strange. Bill, let me ask you one last question, which is if Alaska could forgive 7 felony convictions for Ted Stevens, it seems reasonable that it would be possible to overlook some of Palin's political problems over these past few months. If Governor Palin did end up running in a special election for Ted Stevens' race, and I realize that's getting ahead of the game a little bit, do you think she would actually win?
Well, I tell you, I think it'd be a very close race. I think Governor Palin is very popular in the state, and Mark Begich is also extremely popular in the state. And I think if that were the case, it'd be a very close election. I think it'd be a very hard-fought election. It'd obviously have a lot of national interest, and I would expect a very interesting race to look out for.
Alaska State Senator Bill Wielechowski. I was interested in Alaska politics before Sarah Palin got on the ticket, but it just keeps getting more and more fascinating. I'm getting obsessed. Thank you for your time tonight, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.